So welcome everybody to the second of the Golf Ireland Gender Equality webinars. So last week we touched on the area of leadership and governance, and over the remaining 3 weeks we're going to focus on the final 3 pillars of level par. So again, before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. Again, you can use the Q&A box or the chat box at the bottom to submit any of the questions that you may have. And if we don't get to any of those questions, we will follow up afterwards. Everyone's video and audio won't be on. The only people that you should be able to see are the panelists and myself. So you don't have to worry about anybody being viewed. So last week, like I mentioned, the idea for this series of webinars came from the importance of volunteers, coaches and staff to the ultimate success of Golf Ireland, of level par and its pillars of leadership and governance, coaching and officiating, visibility and participation. So this week our focus is the second pillar of coaching and officiating, and we welcome 2 speakers from the world of sports coaching, Dr. Sue Shapcott and Lisa Fallon. So at the beginning of the level par programme we did some research which found that out of a workforce of 600 PGA professionals, 19 of them were female. Only 1 was level 3 qualified, but then on the other hand we had 42 female level 3 rules officials, 7 of which had international experience, and since then 5 have gone on to officiate at the Open at Royal Portrush last year. So I'm looking forward to a good discussion around this topic today. And our first speaker is Dr. Sue Shapcott, who is a PGA professional and founder of Change Golf Instruction based in Wisconsin, who is actually in the UK today with us rather than in the States. Sue was a former Curtis Cup and Tour player and originally trained in England with the PGA there, and went on to spend 5 years with Hank Haney developing her expertise in Dallas. She's also an educational psychologist and has done a large amount of research into the areas that she's going to speak to us about today. So Sue is going to present 2 topics, so I invite her now to begin with her first topic.
Great. All right, let me have a look at can you see that screen?
Yes, I can see.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to present this first section on a study that I did in Australia about golfers' sense of belonging, what it is, and what we can do to improve it. Carla, you've already done a great job of introducing me, so I'm just going to skip by that. And in this section, then, or on this slide, we're going to talk about what I'm going to cover in this presentation. So what is a sense of belonging? What do we know about golfers' experience? Why does it matter? And what can we do from a practical standpoint to try and increase the sense of belonging that golfers have? And I had a nice little video lined up here that I don't think is going to work, but it's a video that GAA have done to promote their sport, and it really does provide a great example of how sense of belonging can be used in sport to increase participation. And I want to just start out by saying that we talk about creating a sense of belonging. We talk about trying to make golf more welcoming, but those are very broad terms that might mean different things to different people. So I think that one of the first things that is important to do is to put some definitions around what belonging is, so that if we're talking about making golf or your club more welcoming or trying to create a sense of belonging, we have something concrete to base that on. And so I've pulled from the world of psychology and educational psychology, where belonging is being researched in education and corporations, and they've really put a definition around belonging that people feel a sense of belonging when they have a sense of membership within a sport. So that isn't necessarily a traditional membership like being a member of a golf club, but just feeling that they belong to a community. They feel accepted within that community, and being in that community gives them a happy affect. So it makes them feel good. It's a place that they want to go. And so when we measure belonging, then those are the things that we're measuring. And so I took that definition, I took that idea about how we can measure a sense of belonging, and did a project with Golf Australia to try and understand the experience that their players have with regard to feeling a sense of belonging in the game. And it was really interesting to look at sense of belonging and try and figure out not just how they experienced it, but what were predictors of sense of belonging. So I think we can all agree that we want golfers to feel that they're welcome in the game, and they do have a high sense of belonging. But if we can understand what predicts that sense of belonging, then we're going to have a better job of achieving it. So when we looked at the Australian golfers, then there were 3 things that predicted a sense of belonging in golf. One of them was a cultural mindset, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in my next presentation. But basically what it means is the messaging around golf in terms of who is a golfer and who isn't a golfer. The level of environmental stereotyping within the golf culture. So, that could be anything from the pictures that are up in clubhouses, or the the jokes that you hear around the bar, or the messaging that you get in communication. So what are the levels of environmental stereotyping in golf and golfers' handicaps? So the better someone is, then the more likely they are to have a higher sense of belonging in golf. So that was for all of the golfers as a whole. And then we split them up between male golfers and female golfers. And first of all, then male golfers had a significantly higher sense of belonging in golf than female golfers. So if we are trying to increase participation of women in the game, then the fact that they have a lower sense of belonging in the sport is problematic. So, that was one of the big takeaways, that women have a lower sense of belonging in golf than the male golfers. And so then if we split up the data and had a look at the different predictors for male and female golfers, then if we looked at the male golfers just by themselves, then again it was cultural mindset. So the messaging about who a golfer is and who isn't a golfer, the environmental stereotyping. So even for male golfers, then any kind of discriminatory messaging in the environment led to a lower sense of belonging in golf for male golfers. Handicap, again, the better someone is, then the more likely they are to have a sense of belonging. And for male golfers, the number of years that they played was a significant predictor of whether they felt that they belonged in golf. And if we break that down for women, we have the same 3 predictors. So mindset, the stereotyping, and the handicap. And I think that what's really important when we look at women golfers is that the number of years that they play golf isn't on its own a predictor of whether they feel that they actually belong in golf. So, I think we do have to recognize that we have some cultural challenges in terms of trying to make women feel that they belong in the game a little bit more. So that was the first stage of the study that we did. So just to quickly go through the predictors of belonging. So cultural mindset, and I know that Lisa is going to talk a little bit about this too. What I mean by cultural mindset is creating a culture where people feel that they can acquire the skills to succeed in golf, as opposed to creating a culture where they believe that they are never going to be able to improve because golf ability is something that is either innate, that some people have and some people don't, and that they are never going to fit into the golfing culture. So creating an environment where the message is all about you're here to learn golf. Our job is to help you. We know that everyone can get better at golf. Then that is the type of environment that is going to increase a sense of belonging, as opposed to an environment where the message is, you know, this is a club full of very talented players, lots of natural golfers, you know, where the emphasis is on people having an innate skill as opposed to a learned skill. So trying to create a culture of learning as opposed to a culture of genius. There's a couple of books if you want to learn more about cultural mindset that I would recommend, particularly that bottom one there by Matthew Said, who talks a lot about the impact of believing that ability is something that can be learned and the effect that it has not just on the culture but on motivation. The second thing that was a predictor of belonging was environmental stereotyping. So, you know, in golf, I'm sure that we are all aware of the types of stereotypes that exist about women golfers. And so I know them, you know them, we all know them. And if those environmental stereotypes are, you know, out there at a facility where, you know, people feel comfortable, you know, making sexist jokes, or, you know, having a club where, you know, women don't have equal access to tee sheets, or the leadership is, you know, just made up of, you know, male members, then those are all social cues that environmental stereotyping is high. And for both men and women golfers, that is going to lower the sense of belonging that they're going to experience in our game. The recommended book that I have listed for that topic is a book by Claude Steele called Whistling Vivaldi, who in this book talks about something called stereotype threat, which is how environmental cues that reinforce stereotypes can affect not only someone's perception of others, but our own perception of ourselves and how that changes our behaviors. So understanding the power of stereotypes in the environment is really interesting kind of fodder to think about when we think about golf. And I would certainly recommend this book to just give you a little bit more insight on it. And I tried to look through kind of real life examples to think about in golf how they manifest themselves, because I do think it's fair to say that probably everyone in the golf industry wants to increase participation. No one wants to create a culture where people don't feel welcome. And so these cues or these experiences, oftentimes, you know, they're not intentional. They're just part of a system that has been operating in golf for a long time, and so we sometimes don't even give them a second thought. So I came across this one website of a golf course whose name I've blocked out there, and it really gave me everything that I needed all in one page, which was exciting. So they had a few statements here. Golf secret number one: the younger you begin to play, the easier it will be to learn things about golf. Although there are exceptions to every rule, in the majority of situations, the later that you decide to learn golf, the harder it will be to grasp and master. Okay, now, regardless of what you think about golf ability is, about whether you think that golf ability is something that you can only really develop if you learn to play young, then that kind of messaging is going to convey an idea that your facility really values people who are innately good and talented, and is going to create a cultural mindset that lowers new golfers and women golfers' sense of belonging. So messaging like that just reinforces an idea that some people are golfers and other people aren't. So just that statement there, based on the research that we have, suggests that this website is going to decrease sense of belonging for new golfers entering the game or thinking about taking lessons. Okay, so golf secret number 2. The higher the level you have for natural talent, the quicker you will become at your sport. So again, that statement right there reinforces the idea that golf ability is something that some people have and others don't. So that's going to create a cultural mindset that is going to decrease golfers' sense of belonging. And then lastly, this picture here of the coaching team, then like Carla said, the coaching workforce is predominantly male. And so this picture right here, again, with no bad intent, then it conveys a message that golf expertise is something that, you know, male golfers have that women don't. So just, again, reinforces an idea that women golfers particularly are not going to have the expertise to succeed. So just in one website, you've got the predictors of what is going to decrease new and women golfers' sense of belonging in the game. All right, so just very quickly, because I know we're running out of time here. Why sense of belonging matters. So in the study of Australian golfers, then the higher someone's sense of belonging was in golf, then it was a significant predictor that they will play golf again in the future. And that was the only significant predictor. It was more predictive than handicap or how many years they had played in the past. So having a sense of belonging was the driver of whether people will continue to play golf in the future. It was the driver of who will take golf instruction. So sense of belonging increased, then people were more likely to take golf instruction. Handicap decreased, they were less likely. And years playing golf, the more someone played, the less likely they were to take golf instruction. Sense of belonging was also the driver of who will invite their friends to play golf. So it was the biggest predictor of if you have a higher sense of belonging, then you are significantly more likely to invite others to come and experience golf. So all of the behaviors that we want as an industry were driven by golfers' sense of belonging and their experience in the game. So my hope is that with this short presentation that gives you some food for thought about, you know, we all want to create a welcoming environment. How do we do it? What are the things that we need to look out for, and why does it matter? Okay, Carla, back to you. I think I'm out of time here.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That was very interesting, Sue. Really took a lot from that. And if you don't mind, I will hold your questions till you're finished your second piece of presentation.
Yep.
And we will introduce Lisa. So Lisa is the head coach with the London City Lionesses, who are in the Women's FA Championship. She's the only Republic of Ireland born coach to coach in the top 2 divisions of either men's or women's football in the UK. I think she started her career as a 98 FM sports reporter, if I'm not wrong, and she became the first woman to coach a male team in Ireland in 2013. She's worked with Dublin GAA, with Cork City, with the Northern Ireland team to reach the the last 16 of the European Championships. And she's going to speak to us today about her journey and what equality means to her. So Lisa, I'll pass it across to you now.
Thanks very much. I have some slides, so I'll just share this screen and hopefully you'll be able to see this.
Yes.
Okay. So basically, I suppose what I'll do is I'll just draw on some of my experiences on my journey, because my first 10 years, I suppose, in my coaching career were in men's football and at the elite level of men's football, which obviously is a male-dominated environment. So I'm just going to talk about some of the challenges that I faced, and also but some of the opportunities that came within that as well. So for me, is equality about being treated the same? Often people think that equality is about being treated the same, but I'd like to challenge that theory. The dictionary definition is it's the state of being equal, especially in status, rights, or opportunities. So in my career, I often found that perception was one of the barriers, that I got categorized because I was female in a male-dominated environment. And I remember a story I was told once, and it was really interesting. It was that a father and son were driving in the rain, and the weather conditions were really, really poor. And the car hit something on the road, and there was an accident. The son and the father were rushed to hospital, and the son needed surgery. So the brain surgeon came out to look at the son and said, I can't operate on this person, this is my son. And the question was asked, how can that be? And it was really interesting because I was thinking about it, and suddenly I realized that I too had unconscious biases, because it didn't strike me straight away that the brain surgeon could be a woman, that the brain surgeon was in fact the son's mother. I had thought of a lot of other scenarios about how that brain surgeon could have been the son's father, but not the mother. And it made me realize that even though I was a woman working in a male-dominated environment and sometimes experiencing perception issues, that I sometimes was guilty of stereotypes too, based on societal norms. And it was a real interesting lesson for me. So what I realized was that we often look at something, and even though we're looking at the same thing, people see it in different ways. And that there is no definite way of looking at the same thing. Sometimes as a female, I felt it was seen as a positive in that environment, and sometimes it was a negative. But again, it's about our own individual perception, and how do we see a female in that environment, or in an environment that sometimes would be perceived as being male dominated. So do we see it as a positive or a negative from our own perspective? And one of the other things I often found was that being in that environment as a female coach, it was often thought that once I was in the tracksuit, if I got €1 for every time I was asked if I was the physio, I probably could have retired about 10 years ago. Because that was what people thought. When they saw me, they're like, oh, are you the physio? And obviously they didn't think I could be the coach. And I remember one time I was traveling to a Europa League match, and I was doing a reconnaissance for a team. So I was going over to watch the team and see how they played so that we could prepare our match strategy. But I was introduced to the opposition manager, and he asked me if I was the travel agent. In fact, he actually said, Miss Fallon, you must be the travel agent. So I asked him, could I go and have a look at the pitch? I just said, sort of. Went down, had a look at the pitch, but the team were training. And because he thought I was a travel agent, he allowed me to watch his entire training session as they were preparing the set pieces that they were going to act against us, implement against us. So for me, there was an important lesson in that. I could have become offended that he thought I was a travel agent, or I could look at the opportunity that presented. So the fact that he thought I was a travel agent meant that he gave me an opportunity to get a marginal gain for my team. He conceded that to me by not believing that I could have been the opposition analyst. So for me, it was about changing my own mindset, that instead of seeing it as a negative, that I could view it as a positive and just flip it around. And it was always important that I never allowed those incidents or comments or being subjected to unconscious biases or stereotypes, that never impacted on my ability to perform my job to the maximum, and that I didn't have emotional responses to those that would impact on my ability to deliver a high performing performance for the manager and the employers that I had at the times. This one I think is a really interesting one, and it's always one that splits the room. So I know we're not interactive here, but I would say, I'd be confident to say that some of you can very clearly see that as a blue and black dress. But then I would say, and based on every time I show this, there is 50-50 in this webinar that see that as a white and gold dress. And there is no denying that anyone who sees that dress as white and gold, I guarantee you that there's no way I could convince you that the dress is blue and black. And vice versa, if you see that dress as blue and black, I would be confident that there's no way I could convince you that that dress is white and gold. And generally, it's a 50-50 split. I personally see that dress as white and gold. But I know that I think I can see Sue has acknowledged maybe that she sees blue and black.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's really interesting about this is if we were a jury and everybody here, so say there's approximately 65, 70 people here, could we unanimously agree on the colour of that dress? And the reality is probably no, because it's so clear. But the truth is the dress is actually blue and black. And it's the reason we see it differently is just purely down to the way that we actually process light. But it just goes to show that when we're all sitting here, we can all agree that we're looking at exactly the same thing, but quite defiantly, we see something very, very different. And it would be very hard for us to change our perception that what the other colour is what the dress actually is. So I always say to people that in order to implement change or to reduce a stereotype or to embrace somebody who wouldn't normally be in an environment to be there and have a place there and as Sue said, to have that sense of belonging. So it means doing things differently, and when you do differently, that can make people feel uncomfortable. It means coming out of your comfort zone. It means stretching yourself. So what I'd say is if you could just clasp your hands together as normal, and genetically, some people are left over right and some are right over left. And that is a genetic thing. But what I will say to you is if you unlace your hands and relace them the other way, the opposite way, so your opposite thumb is the other way round, and it probably feels quite wrong, probably feels uncomfortable, doesn't feel right, is generally the way that people feel when you do it the other way around. So what I would say to you is if you relace your hands and lace them together intermittently, so the right way, the wrong way. And if you do that a few times, what becomes really interesting is that when people start to do things differently, that quite quickly it can be a case that it changes and it doesn't feel so wrong, and you can become normalized in an environment. So if you take your hands away and then put them back together normally and then relace them to the other way around, straight away you'll probably find it doesn't feel as uncomfortable as it did the first time. And it just goes to show that quite quickly things can normalize, even though initially it's different. And that for me was my experience in men's football, because once I was in the environment and people started to get used to it, that I did find that I normalized in that environment, and it happened actually quite quickly. So doing things differently, it shouldn't be about being different. It should be about giving a different person an opportunity. So that people don't view me as being different because I'm female, but that they view there's an opportunity here for us to give a role or give an opportunity to someone who is different to what we normally do before. In my own experience in these environments, I found that it was possible and very easily that I became normalized in both male and female elite sports environments. There were times when I felt isolated, for sure, particularly when I was in men's football. And I also felt that I had to do more to prove myself in those environments. I certainly, and if I'm honest about it now, and in hindsight, back in the time, I probably didn't share these stories, but I certainly found that I experienced challenges that male coaches did not encounter in the same environments. And I was also denied opportunities because, and I quote, it would be difficult to appoint a woman. regardless of my qualifications, regardless of my experience, regardless of whether my experience and my qualifications were bigger or outweighed those of other people for the same opportunities. The reality was, I was told it would be difficult for the person who was making the appointment to appoint a woman to that role because of the impact it would have on them, not about my ability to do the job. And for me, that was a really interesting dynamic, that it's actually hard for the person who wants to give the opportunity to the woman to give that opportunity. And that was a factor I didn't consider before. And I also encountered that it wouldn't be right to expect me to be away from my children, but that the same consideration wasn't considered a problem for male staff. So if you're going on an away trip, people would say, oh, it's probably more difficult for you to go because you'd be away from your kids. But male members of staff who had children were never had that told to them. So again, it was a perception, and it was a stereotype that as a mum I shouldn't, or they couldn't ask that of me, but as a dad they could. And I thought that was an interesting dynamic. But when I was in, and I did find some challenges, but an interesting thing I experienced it in January of 2019. I was on a course in the UK, and it was a really interesting lesson on a seminar we did on diversity, equality and inclusion. So it was about that achieving equality does not mean being treated the same. We were in the room, and I was the only female coach in the room of all male football coaches who work in professional men's football in England. And he asked me, did I feel I should be treated the same as all the others? And I said, absolutely. And he said, I don't think so. And I felt a little bit aggrieved. And other male coaches in the room felt the same and started to say, there's no reason why she shouldn't be treated the same. She's as good as any of us. She's got more experience than some of us. And they felt the same. And he said, I still disagree. And he explained a little story to us, that if 3 people were at a match and all of them wanted to just see the match, but there's a fence. So if you were to treat the 3 people the same, that the outcomes would be that not everybody would be able to see the match by treating everybody the same. So he was saying that, to make the point, was that equality is actually about treating people in a way that they can achieve the same outcome. And it never really resonated with me before. But he made the point that as a female coach in men's football, I probably, and certainly did, encounter challenges that the male coaches never experienced. And for that reason, he felt that I sometimes might need some extra support. And it was only when he said it to us that day and explained it in that way that I actually believed, you know what, maybe that is true. That if something isn't normal, and if you have to face different, harder challenges than a male just because you're female, and the reason that you face those extra challenges is only because you're female, then maybe we have to do more about that in our environments, in our businesses, in our associations, and in our professional sports setups, that we all have a role to play in terms of making sure that everybody, regardless of whether they're male or female, that they can all still achieve the same outcome. And subsequently, I saw an even nicer one, which is where, in the end, that we could achieve a situation whereby there just are no barriers, and that you don't need the extra help to be able to achieve the same outcome, that you can just have it because the barriers are no longer there. And that ultimately, I feel, has to be the goal for all of us, is to get to a point where if we have to have extra support in order to achieve the same outcomes initially, but that the ultimate goal becomes that is done with a view to removing the barriers as the ultimate goal. So what is equality? It's not about being treated the same. It is about the state of being equal and especially in status, rights and opportunities. I certainly wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have really brave managers who were happy enough to appoint me and give me an opportunity, regardless of the fact that I was female and regardless of the fact that that was not what was normal in the environment. If it wasn't for those male managers, and they were all male managers, if it wasn't about them giving me that opportunity and having that sense of courage to do it and to be different, then there's no way I would be where I am today. I would never have had those opportunities. So my question then to all of you is, can you affect change? Are you aware of your own unconscious biases? And can you challenge them? Are you prepared to do something differently? Are you prepared to give the support that might be needed to a female athlete or a female staff member? The challenges that I faced on my journey were that I didn't speak up about unfair challenges because I didn't want to be a problem. When I was in environments and I'd got so far, I felt that if I spoke up about some of the challenges, that people would go, well, that's a reason why women shouldn't be there. And I also accepted that it would be more difficult because I was a woman, not for any other reason, but just because I was a woman. I accepted that as part of my journey. And I also accepted that dealing with some elements of sexism was par for the course. In hindsight, I was a rookie, I was developing, but looking back now, I certainly would have challenged some of those things. And I feel now now that I've got to this point, it's an opportunity for me to speak out about that and share that story, because it's not okay to have to deal with those things just because you're a woman. And everybody in any environment has a role to play and an opportunity to change that. And ideally, what we create is a culture and an environment and a society where our daughters have the same opportunities as our sons. And that, for me, is what the responsibility of all of us and our generation is, that we create an environment where any female can have the same opportunity as any male going forward, and that it's not about being male or female, it's just about being who you are. So just finally, my last point is that equality is about treating people in a way that allows them to achieve the same outcomes. So thank you very much. I hope that is just gives you a small insight into some of my journey, and I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I absolutely love that analogy about the barriers. I think it's very, very powerful. I personally see the gold and white dress, and there was some chat going on there about that there was different colours completely in it. So there is definitely some variation there that we can see. I have a couple of questions, and there was actually one that just came in there. So I suppose, how do we encourage more women and girls to sort of challenge for those roles that might traditionally be seen as male dominated, whether it be like managerial roles or chair people or whatever? That, how do we kind of go about that?
I think it's really interesting, because I think sometimes we're our own worst enemies. I heard a really good story a while ago where if there was a job description and 10 of the items, as a woman, that you ticked off 6 of the boxes, we wouldn't apply. Whereas unless we ticked all 10 boxes, we wouldn't apply for the role. We'd rule ourselves out. Whereas guys would go, yeah, I can do most of them, and they would automatically apply, even if they only ticked 5 or 6 of the boxes. So we have to put ourselves out there. We have to be brave and put a value on our experiences and have that courage to go and apply for things. But it's also about supporting each other, and it's down to everybody. Everybody in an environment has that opportunity to look at things differently and see what can you bring, as opposed to what stereotypes would indicate that you can't. But certainly, I think as women, we have to start applying for those roles and have that self-confidence and that belief that we have something to bring to the table. We do have different skill sets that we can bring that are extremely valuable, and it's about, you know, putting ourselves forward and having that confidence to do it, and then obviously having the confidence in the people that you're applying to give the opportunities as well.
Very good. And I suppose initially in your career, you kind of touched on it there, was you may have found it hard to ensure that your voice was heard, or if you're in an all-male dressing room that you're being listened to. But you speak so powerfully and so well now that that's kind of hard to imagine that you wouldn't be listened to. So was it that case that you initially found yourself hard to speak up and have your voice heard?
I think I was quite respectful of the environments I was in, and I always made an attempt to understand the environment that I was in. The male dressing room is quite different to the female dressing room, so I had to learn to respect it and understand it. But at the ultimate end of the day, my job was to bring information about helping us to win football matches and to bring levels of detail that would allow us to prepare a really good game strategy to win the games and to be successful. And I found that once I was concentrating on actually doing my job, people wanted to hear what I had to say. People valued my opinion. People valued the information I was bringing to the table. And once I focused on actually just doing my job as opposed to the environment that I was in, whilst being respectful of it, very quickly I found that I had a voice. And then over time, as you progress and as you continue on your personal development and your professional development and continue doing courses and pushing to new levels, that confidence grew within me because my experience grew and my knowledge grew. And as a result of all of that, then it becomes easier to have that confidence to speak in those environments. But for me, it's about just ensuring that you don't dilute yourself. But for me, it was always about having that confidence to speak and for the people around you to listen and that. But it was always about, for me, focusing on my job and doing what I needed to do, and that ultimately became the platform for me to have a voice.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I think we'll have a lot to take from your words there. We're going to move back to Sue now to finish her second part of her presentation. So Sue is going to speak a little bit more on the areas of stereotyping and that kind of thing. So I welcome Sue back there now.
Great. So I'm going to provide more of a data type for some of the things that Lisa was saying. So they go really well together, these presentations. So I think anecdotally then, most of us women who work in golf or sport, have an experience where, we feel that we're being treated differently and expectations about us are lower oftentimes. And so that was one of the driving forces for me going down a research route, in as much as I wanted to have some data that could measure whether women's experience in golf was different to men's experience in golf. So it kind of just put some data and some support around some of the things that we experience as women. And I looked at the coaching environment. That was what was interesting to me as a coach, but also as a way of trying to increase women's participation through coaching. So the International Golf Federation, along with other PGAs, have recognized the role of coaching in increasing women's golf participation. And there's no doubt that good coaches really can make a difference. But it's also a big responsibility for us as coaches to try and carry the burden of increasing participation, particularly if there is a bias that is experienced by women who are taking up the game. So that was really the rationale or the approach that I had to a study that I did about whether women's experience when they're learning to play golf is different to men's, and whether golf coaches perceive women golfers differently to male golfers. And a lot of this stuff that we're talking about today is connected to the pipeline that we have in golf and in other sports, where we need more people entering the pipeline, men, women, so that at the end of it, we still have a good chunk of them. So good coaching means that more women stay in that pipeline, And then we have more women at the end who can go on to either, play golf at a higher level or participate at their club as a leader or take on coaching positions. So, the coaching experience at the start of that pipeline is really important and is something that is of great interest to me. So in my last presentation, I talked about cultural mindset, and that was, or mindset is also the mechanism that I used in this study to measure the coaching experience and coaches' perception of people that they taught. Now, many of you, I'm sure, are aware of Carol Dweck's work around mindset, whether you have a growth mindset or more of a fixed mindset. And you can have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset about anything, whether it's your ability to play golf, whether it's your ability to be good at mathematics, whether you have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset about your cooking ability, you name it, you can have a growth or a fixed mindset about it. Meaning that if you have a fixed mindset, you might believe that golf ability is something that is innate, it isn't learned, it's something that you've got or you haven't got. And that fixed mindset, we know, is really bad for motivation, really bad for persistence, really bad at overcoming bumps in the road, as opposed to a growth mindset where you have more of a belief that golf ability is something that can be learned, developed. If you have a bad day or a bad round or a bad season, then, if you have more of a growth mindset, you can learn from it, you overcome it, and you can go on to recover from it. So this whole concept of growth mindset and fixed mindset is very prevalent now in sport and in golf, and I'm sure that many of you are already familiar with it. So we can have a mindset about our own ability, and we know that that has great ramifications for our own behaviors. And so in a study that I did, I was interested in looking at golf coaches' mindsets about the ability of people that they taught. So I was interested in whether golf coaches had the same mindset about male golfers and female golfers, meaning that do they have a growth mindset about male golfers and do they have a growth mindset about female golfers, or is there a difference in how they perceived the ability of male golfers and female golfers? And so mindsets of golf coaches mattered, or they matter because the mindset that we have about someone's ability is significantly correlated to the type of feedback that they give. So, for example, if I have more of a growth mindset about a golfer that I'm teaching, then I'm more likely to give feedback that suggests ways to help them improve, which sounds very basic and obvious considering that I'm supposed to be a golf coach. If I have more of a fixed mindset about someone's ability, then instead of giving them feedback that is going to help them learn to improve, then I give them feedback that is more comforting, in a way judgmental, but kind of done in a nice way, that might suggest things like, I know, Sue, that you're struggling with your golf, but don't worry about it. I know you're good at other things. So, not everyone can be good at golf. So the type of feedback and the interaction that coaches have is related to the mindset that they have about someone's ability. Golf coaches' mindset is also correlated to their level of stereotyping that they do. And when I talked about belonging, we know that environmental stereotyping is a predictor of belonging. So these things all fit together. So developing coaches with more of a growth mindset can help that too. And so I was really interested in how golf coaches' mindsets played out on the coaching tee and golfers' experience when they were being coached. And it ended up being the topic of my PhD, and what we found was that we call it here the gendered experience for women golfers usually started on the practice tee. So when men and women went for golf lessons, then they had a significantly different experience, and that experience we could bring back to the mindset of coaches who were teaching them. So golf coaches, we found, and this is with thousands of golf coaches, so I'm not talking about, you know, any one coach in particular, and there's obviously individual differences, but when you have a large sample of golf coaches, then golf coaches, men and women, had a significantly more growth mindset about male golfers' ability than female golfers. So that meant that when someone goes for a golf lesson, if you're a man, then the golf coach who is teaching you is going to be significantly more likely to think that you can learn golf and you can improve your golf than if you're a woman. So that experience starts on the coaching tee. And I do want to, you know, emphasize that when I looked at the data for just female coaches, the same biases existed. So I'm not saying that, you know, this is the experience that women have with male coaches and they don't have it with women coaches. I'm not saying that at all. We live in the same culture. We're all influenced by the same biases. But as coaches, we've got to recognize that they exist, and we've got to be aware of them so that we can do something about them. Okay, so just to give you an example of some of the feedback that we found in this study, then we looked at golf coaches who were teaching struggling recreational male and female golfers. And these are the type of golfers who are, you know, entering that pipeline. They're the new players who we need to keep in the game. And coaches with more of a growth mindset, these are just a summary of some of the type of feedback that we looked at. Coaches with more of a growth mindset would focus on the problem and its correction. If something went wrong, they would tell them how to control it. They would give feedback that demonstrated or explained how to improve. They had high expectations for improvement with their students, and they would consider, you know, all performances, good or bad, as learning opportunities. And that is contrasted with coaches with more of a fixed mindset who would make more judgmental and comforting type feedback, communicated lower expectations, and if a golfer performed badly, then that would just confirm that they obviously weren't very good at golf and would never be able to learn. So from a coaching standpoint, if you have a look at that feedback that is stacked up there, then, you know, it's quite obvious that a player is going to be able to flourish if they had a coach with more of a growth mindset, who would give them the type of feedback that is listed on the left, as opposed to more of a fixed-minded coach who gives the type of feedback that is listed on the right. And back to the big picture takeaway of my study, it's problematic that we have a coaching workforce who is charged with the responsibility of increasing female golf participation, that we have a coaching workforce who has a significantly less growth mindset about women golfers than male golfers. So the question is, what can we do to change our own mindset and create a better coaching culture for men and women? And, you know, these are the kind of things that I too have to work on, you know, every day when I'm going out to teach, to recognize my own biases. What assumptions am I making about people that I'm teaching, male and female, so that I can make sure I'm coaching in the best way possible to help someone improve their golf and stay motivated in the game and feel that they belong in golf. And like Lisa said during her presentation, then just challenging your own mindset, you know, being aware of the biases that you have and the stereotypes that you're making about someone. And, you know, again, every day I have to remind myself that I teach at a public facility, and I partner with the City of Madison, and our goal is to drive participation through coaching programs. And so even though it's what I do day in, day out, and it's the bread and butter of my research and my business, then, you know, I'm aware that I can have biases about people that I'm teaching. So being mindful of the mindset that I have. Be aware of my communication, the words that I'm using. Am I communicating that golf ability is something that is innate, or is it something that can be developed? And you know, it's just so interesting when you listen to golf on TV, then how the commentators kind of reinforce more of a fixed mindset about golf ability. So, you know, being aware that, you know, I'm not doing the same thing. Be a culture of learn it all, not know it all. And that, you know, all kinds of learning is a process, and you're going to have ups and downs along the way. And I'm not an exception to that, and neither are the people that we're teaching, but, you know, consistently reinforce this idea that there's going to be ups and downs in the learning process, and they are not symptomatic of anything other than normal learning. Talking about your own failures as a coach, as a player, as a student, just, you know, make failure not something that you celebrate, of course, but, you know, be realistic about the fact that if we are learning something new, if we're going to take up golf and try and improve our golf, then it is not going to be a straight line from A to B. We're going to have ups and downs, and we're going to fail a lot. And it's important to talk about your own experiences learning to play golf. Or, you know, if I think about, you know, my own coaching career, then at the start of it, then I was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing, and I'm sure that I made many people worse before I made them better. And so, you know, just being open enough to talk about the fact that you're still learning as a coach, you're still learning as a player, and that's going to make others more comfortable too. Because you need to create an environment where your players will say to you, look, I'm really struggling with this and I need help, instead of you know, allowing them to just get frustrated and then drop out of the game because they don't think that they've got what it takes to learn to play golf. So, you know, create an environment where, you know, you can all talk about things that you're struggling with, so that you can help people improve, instead of creating a culture, a coaching culture, where people you know, won't talk to you about things that you know, they're stuck on. You know, again, more about the failure. So, you know, have your coaching culture where you know, you constantly reinforce this idea that learning is difficult, and that it's normal if you don't understand what it is that you need to do to improve, or you don't understand why you're not playing that well. And for those coaches out there who use systems like Coach Now or some kind of communication tool with your students, you know, I really love it when players send me messages saying I had my best round ever. But equally, I love it when they send me messages that say, I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm frustrated, and I have my worst round of the year yesterday and I need help. Because I'm happy that I've created a culture where they will share that with me, so that we can go about fixing their golf games together and helping them improve together. This video isn't going to be able to play on this system, but I will send a link of it to Lisa. It's a video that I send to my students to try and create that, you know, more of a growth mindset learning environment. And it just is the reality of learning. It's a guy on his skateboard learning how to do a certain move, and it's a great example of the realities of learning. And that is the kind of culture that we need to create in our coaching environments, so that we can change the bias that women feel when they are learning to play golf, and try and improve as coaches on that level, so that we break down some of the biases that our coaching workforce has. All right. Okay, I know that we're running short of time here, so I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Sue. Very, very interesting. I think there's a lot to take in there, obviously, with all your research, but I think what was really nice about it was that obviously you're looking at what you're speaking about from a coaching perspective, but a lot of it is transferable to different roles that people in the room, or the virtual room here, might have. And in terms of, like, we can all have this mindset against, whether it be new golfers or like you said, some of the stereotypes that we have. So in terms of a general club member, for example, in terms of how important is it in terms of, say, the narrative that is used at their club to create that sense of belonging and create that, or to knock down those barriers and those stereotypes that we kind of tend to see?
Yeah, I think it's really important. If we think about the coaching experience and how that cultural mindset relates to belonging, and we know that it is one of the key tenets of it, then we can be very aware of messaging that we send in marketing, pictures that we send in marketing material, pictures that are up in golf shops, just our language that we use day in, day out at golf clubs can have a big influence, not only on golfers' sense of belonging, but on the coaching tee. Just being aware of this kind of stuff can change how you interact with players that you're teaching and talking to, and it all just helps chip away at this different experience that men and women have in golf.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose you personally, I mean, we have a campaign in Ireland. I don't know if you've come across the 20 by 20 campaign, and the tagline is, if she can't see it, she can't be it. And when you touched on there, having the kind of the coaching team of all male on the website, and it was front and center there, like if again, the same kind of question I've asked Lisa, like, how are we going to create an environment where more girls and more women see coaching as an opportunity for them? And was that something that you either did or didn't have a role model that kind of paved the way for you as a player and as a coach?
Yeah, I would very much agree with what Lisa said. I got a break because people, Hank Haney was willing to take a chance on me. So we need male allies to help us along. We're not going to do this without male allies, because right now women don't have much power in golf and in sports. So we're not going to really move the needle at all unless we get people willing to give us a chance, so that we can show what we can do.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful. And I don't know, Lisa, this might be a question for you as well. I mean, was it something that you saw going up through the ranks of, obviously, your UEFA Pro license and at the top level of coaching certificates and everything? So that, are there more girls and women at level 1, level 2, and as you go up through the ranks, maybe that pairs off? And sort of, do you think in the future we will see more women getting to the top level of coaching and coaching male teams and female teams?
Yeah, I hope so. I certainly found that as I started out the coaching journey, there would have been females on it, but once I got to the UEFA A, I was one of 53 as a female, and on the pro license, yes, it's the same. The numbers are much smaller at the higher level, but I do think that what I did find in my experience was, even though I was often on my own, I did find that I normalized really quickly in the environment. And once people could see what you could do and could see that the information that you could bring in the dressing rooms, players, it normalized so quickly. Like they just would never have seen me as a female. They just saw me as a coach. And same with the managers and the backroom staffs that I worked with. They just never ever saw me as they would never have distinguished me as being female. They just said, you know, I was really normal. And that for me was the biggest piece, that how quickly it normalized for me. But yes, those challenges in those environments as you go on. But I do think we are starting to have more visibility. I think females, and even from my own personal point of view, I was always really conscious. I had 10 years in men's football, and I was really conscious of almost not drawing attention to myself, because I felt if there's attention on me, then people will, because you get scrutinized more. And I found that if I brought attention on me, it might be a barrier for people to give me the next opportunity. So I've tended to kind of stay quiet and stay under the radar as much as I could. But now I think we have a voice, and, you know, you can show that it's been done. I mean, I've had the most amazing experiences at the highest levels of football. And, you know, the one thing it has taught me is that it's possible. Mm-hmm. It's actually possible, even though sometimes I may not have believed it possible, or I might not have felt I was good enough. I learned all the time. And exactly what Sue said, as you're learning, you fail, you make mistakes, and you go, okay, that's really interesting, I'm going to learn from that the next time I'm in that type of environment. And, you know, I'm fortunate enough, I worked with the Northern Ireland men's teams. We got to the last 16 of the Euros. I've 26 games in the Europa and the Men's Champions League, won the double with Cork City, won All Ireland with the Dublin men's Gaelic football team. 5 years ago, there's no way I would have believed anyone who told me that was possible. Mm-hmm. But now I know it is. And that for me is just an incentive to keep going and to tell other women it is possible, and to tell men, give them an opportunity, because I'm telling you, we won't let you down. We're really good at what we do. We're resilient. We have that capacity to learn and drive on, and we will, you know, women will be a really, really good addition to your team, a really positive addition.
Thank you very much. I think that is a great place to finish. Lisa and Sue, I really, really appreciate you speaking with us today. Sorry guys, I know we're gone a little bit over time, but I think it was worth staying on the extra few minutes. Next week, we will be focusing on what we touched on a little bit there, is the third pillar, visibility, and we actually have some really cool speakers as well lined up. So I hope people can make that. I will be circulating the registration link for that in the coming days. Again, guys, thank you so much. And I'm sure that there's going to be some good feedback. So there's a few thank yous coming in there already. But thank you very much, and I appreciate you speaking to us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.